We love you at Picture House.
I love you at Picture House. I love you. I mean, I go to your Leicester Square theatre all the time.
Yeah, Picture House Central. It's a classic for a reason.
Heathcliff, you're not enough. Not for her.
Look, I have to ask you about this first because it captured my heart and my imagination and delighted me. Can you tell me about your snail actors, please?
Yes, you want to talk about Felicity.
Immediately I want to talk about Felicity.
You need to talk about Felicity, and that makes sense. So obviously a lot of the things in this film are kind of textural, quite a lot of wetness, stickiness maybe.
It's a clammy film.
It's a sticky film. It's a sticky, clammy film. And so I knew I wanted a kind of macro shot of the underside of a snail sort of secreting. And so we got a marvellous snail actress called Felicity, who is, I believe, minute to minute, the most highly paid actor on the film Wuthering Heights. But, you know, actually, the animal handlers were so incredible. We actually had a lot of animals in this, a lot of beautiful horses, leeches, you know, so it's, but Felicity was sublime.
I mean, it's an animalistic film, but yeah, she's a star.
She's a star.
And what material for Felicity? Wuthering Heights. It's meant to be. I mean, it's a book that's captured imaginations for 180 years. I know it's a big question, but what do you think it is that really captures people with this book? Why we keep coming back to it and we still have this fixation with it?
Because I think it's really difficult, and it's really physical. And I think that there are very few books that are as physically provocative as this book. And I think that for lots of us, the first time reading it was the first time we understood that actually you can appreciate something not on just an emotional or an intellectual level, but actually in a physical one. And when I first read the book, I cried a lot. And, you know, I was disturbed and I was aroused. It's such an extremely visceral thing. And so because I love to make movies that make people feel physically, I kept coming back to this.
Yeah, it's such a match made in heaven for you as a director, I think, and for the incredible talent that you've got on board. I mean, to talk about some of your human talent as well.
Yes, I suppose we have to.
I want to ask you about Margot, not only as a star, which she is. I mean, she's born for this role, she's incredible, but also as a producer, which is the capacity that you've known her in for longer. Tell me about that journey and that relationship to this point now of directing her.
Yeah. Well, look, I think the thing about Margot is she's just exceptionally gifted. She is really, like, remarkable in every way. And I've worked with her now on all my films as a producer. And she's, you know, one of the most generous, insightful, smart, but genuinely, you know, supportive people. She supports everyone, and particularly women, with such, like, fervour and enthusiasm. And she's just really incredible. And so she was the person, thank goodness, she read the script as a producer and then, you know, very politely and tentatively asked if she might play Cathy, which I was so relieved, because it was sort of a bit like...
Were you secretly hoping?
Well, it was a bit like in the cinema when you kind of don't know if you want to sort of yawn and put your arm around someone. I think, like, I was just too embarrassed to ask, you know. I would never want to sort of... We have such a great relationship as producer and director. I would never want to put her in a position where she, you know... But luckily she wanted to do it. And I think the thing about Cathy and the thing about Margot is it needs somebody with her talent and her intuition and her charisma. Because Cathy's a little monster. You know, she's Scarlett O'Hara. It needs somebody who we love in spite of her terrible behaviour. You know, she's this extraordinary kind of childlike character. And so, yeah, just working with Margot every day was so incredible. She doesn't want to do... She's only interested in doing things that are difficult. She's only interested in doing things that are exposing. You know, she wants to push, and that's, you know, very, very rare.
Heathcliff is gone. You must accept it.
what a gorgeous pairing for her with Jacob Elordi. I mean, obviously someone you've worked with before as well. When did you think of him for this?
Well, I think in a very sort of nebulous way, I've always thought about Wuthering Heights and been obsessed with it. And the way that I work and kind of write, I suppose, is I have lots of imaginary worlds that I live in and I go and visit, and over years, really. And then what usually happens is one kind of pulls into focus. And I never quite know what it will be, but one of these worlds I was living in has always been Wuthering Heights. And when I first saw Jacob in his 2006 Sideburns, I was just struck by how much he looked like the Heathcliff on the cover of my cheap sort of kind of romantic paperback. And then having worked with him on Saltburn, the thing about Felix in Saltburn, the idea of him was always that he does something horrible in every single scene. And the trick is for the audience not to notice.
You love him anyway.
You love him anyway. You love him anyway. And that's the thing about Jacob, is that Jacob is so clever and his performances are so kind of well judged, and he's got a sort of natural tenderness and sensitivity that communicates the kind of, it just communicates something that means you kind of understand. Because Heathcliff is, again, like Kathy, he's horrible in lots of ways. He's cruel and he's vengeful and he's thin-skinned and he's deeply unkind in lots of ways, but you kind of understand why. And the thing is, it needed somebody like Jacob that you would be able to forgive, for right or wrong. I'm not saying that these things are forgivable. It's just that for me in the book, Heathcliff has always been he's a Byronic romantic hero, which is troubling because he's not nice. But for us to be able to,
you need to see that shade in him that he could be.
I think you've got to root for them.
Yeah. I love the way you cast your films. It's something that's really struck me throughout, your filmography. Not only in that you cast wonderful, brilliant, talented people who give great performances, but also the ways that you kind of test or challenge assumptions as well. I remember reading about your casting of Promising Young Woman, which is such a clever film that I love. And casting all these familiar nice boys and directing them, you're in a rom-com and you're the hero. I'd love to unpick a little bit, when you're filling out your supporting cast for the film, what were those assumptions that you wanted to prod at, and how were you trying to do that with your casting?
Oh, that's such a great question. I mean, I think the thing that I always feel is I respond quite emotionally to performances and to actors. And so a lot of the time, I'm looking, it's actually, I never really think of it as like a supporting characters. I always think of it as a theatre group, which sounds very lovey, but it is true. It's like we do lots and lots of rehearsals, and in every movie that I've made, I've really wanted it to feel sort of very collaborative. And so for me, what I always knew is I needed Edgar, for example. Edgar has to be a real romantic threat. He's got to be a romantic threat to Heathcliff. And so it needed somebody who was a romantic lead. And I watched Shazad a few years before in a film called What's Love Got to Do with It?
Yeah.
And it just completely struck me that I was like, oh, it was like watching like Hugh Grant in For Weddings or something. I was like, oh, that's a romantic. That's a romantic
guy.
lead.
Yeah.
I believe everything he's doing, and it really struck me. And I thought, and so really early on, I thought, well, what I would love is to show the kind of wealth that could turn a head. It's not just a sort of landed gentry. I think it's got to be somebody who is part of this huge explosion of an industrial revolution, somebody who's bringing with them like enormous wealth and not just wealth, but kind of, a new world. That's a lot of the stuff that happens in Wuthering Heights. You feel this sense of people who are marooned, and the world, the trains being built through Yorkshire and factories and all of this kind of stuff. And so in a very kind of I felt it was kind of important to show for Cathy. It's not just, it's not just kind of the local grandee. It's actually it's a real threat to Heathcliff. It's somebody kind and beautiful and rich beyond, and somebody who's travelled, and all of those things. And Shazad just fit the bill so beautifully. And then looking at Alison, I've worked with Alison before, and I think she's a genius. Yeah. I think she's extraordinary. And I knew that Isabella, again, you don't want her to simply be the victim of circumstance.
She's quite a tragic character in the book, sort of.
She's a tragic character in the book, but also there's a kind of there's this extraordinary kind of undercurrent in the book as well that's very troubling, which is that, there's something about Heathcliff's kind of cruelty that is in some ways sort of appealing to her. Now, I, like Emily Bronte, don't make any moral judgments about characters. I kind of don't want to. I don't think it's interesting. I think other people can decide for themselves what they want. But what I know with Alison is that she is so centred, she's so whole as a performer, that she could play an Isabella who could be that complicated and interesting. And then the same with Hong. Nellie is a very interesting character in the book. And, often she's sidelined in the movie adaptations, and I don't think that's right. I think she's in many ways
the storyteller.
She's the storyteller. She's the narrator. And so I wanted somebody who had that kind of power. And, it wasn't just a kind of maid as she is in the books, but had was sort of in that kind of interesting place that a lot of people were at the time of being a companion. So she is a lady, but she's also very much not. And, Hong's just one of the greatest actors of a generation, right? So it needed somebody like that. We would understand every decision that Nellie made. And then, can we just quickly talk about Martin Clunes?
Yes, please. I think that's, Martin Clunes.
I mean, I think we all want to talk about Martin Clunes because I've been obsessed with him my whole life. I've always known that he's one of the great actors. You just know it when you watch him. You sense it. And so I begged him. I begged him to be in this film because it needed somebody that, again, like all of the others, that you love, even though they're a monster.
Yeah.
Did you think it would stop me?
I love all around the way you speak about this film. You talk about wanting to recapture the experience of being 14 and reading the book and that kind of swell of emotion. Saltburn, we have a sort of under-25s club at Picture House.
Oh, amazing.
And Saltburn is one of the biggest films we've ever had with that audience. They loved it. They just kept coming back. Good. And I'm curious, when you're writing and when you're making films, how much is that sort of younger viewer in your mind? And what do you hope they get out of Wuthering Heights?
I think, honestly, the way that I work is I sort of think of myself. I always just think, I feel like I'm the first audience member when I'm writing, and then when I'm at the monitor, watching, it's just does this make me feel something? Do I feel something now? Do I feel, perturbed? Do I feel that, do I feel the tongue go into the drain? Is that, do I feel the moment that Heathcliff breaks that chair for Cathy? If I feel it, then that's kind of where I start from. And then that is extended to the crew and extended to the actors if we all feel it on the day. And I think that's just how we all work together. And so the hope is that then other people will feel it, of any generation, of any age. All I ever want to do, and why I love making movies and why I love the Picture House, is that I think we really need to be together and feel things together and argue and all of the things that movies can do. And so anyone who wants to come and watch a movie that I've made, I feel very, very honoured.
So kiss me and let us both be damned.